Hello, good day. Today I will be reporting about language, specifically understanding sentences. So we are going to talk about three main topics. First is syntax, second is parsing and its model, and the third one is the importance of prediction in understanding sentences. First, let's talk about syntax. Syntax is the systematic way in which words can be combined and sequenced to make meaningful phrases and sentences. Simply put, syntax refers to the structure of a sentence. It plays a major role in understanding language. According to Sternberg 2012, a sentence comprises of at least two parts. First is the noun phrase, which contains at least one noun, often the subject of the sentence, and includes all the relevant descriptors of the noun, like big or fast. Second is the verb phrase or the predicate. It contains at least one verb and whatever the verb acts on, if the verb is acting on anything. An example of the sentence is the girl spotted a yacht. In this sentence, the noun phrase is the girl and the verb phrase is spotted the yacht. In the noun phrase, we can see that there is the noun, which is the girl, and the determiner, the. And in the verb phrase, there is one verb, which is spotted, and a noun, which is the yacht. The key to determining how strings of words create meaning is to consider how meaning is created by the grouping of words into phrases. This process is called parsing. Now we are in the second part, which is about parsing. Parsing is a process that occurs when a person hears or reads a string of words and groups these words into phrases in their mind. For example, after the musician played the piano, she left the stage. That's how we heard the sentence. Now, if we parsed it in our mind, it would be, after the musician played the piano, she left the stage. The way the words are grouped in this example, it indicates that the person has interpreted the sentence to mean that the musician played the piano and then left the stage. Another example would be, after the musician played the piano, the crowd cheered wildly. All of these possibilities which create sentences that are easy to understand and that it makes sense. Another example. After the musician played the piano was wheeled off the stage. After hearing those words and the sentence, we tend to think that the musician was wheeled off the stage because of the construction of the sentence. However, reading the sentence as a whole would make one confused as the grouping is incorrect. So, we need to reparse the sentence. The correct grouping is, after the musician played, the piano was wheeled off the stage. It isn't the musician who was wheeled off, but the piano. When written, adding a comma makes a correct parsing of this sentence clear. After the musician played, comma, the piano was wheeled off the stage. Now, the earlier example, which is after the musician played, the piano was wheeled off the stage, is an example of a garden path sentence. So what are garden path sentences? These are sentences that appear to mean one thing, but then end up meaning something else. Simply put, these are misleading sentences, which illustrates temporary ambiguity because the first organization is adopted and then when the error is realized, the person shifts to correct the organization. We have here an example. Please look at the pictures. First is, after the musician played the piano, was wheeled off the stage. So that is incorrect. So after reparsing, after the musician played, the piano was wheeled off the stage. So now we will be able to understand that after the musician played, then the piano was wheeled off the stage. We will proceed to the garden path model of parsing. which is proposed by Lynn Frazier in 1979. It is one of the early proposals to explain parsing, especially garden path sentences. It assumes that the parser operates autonomously without any influence of non-syntactic factors. The said approach states that grouping of words into phrases is governed by a number of processing mechanisms called heuristics. So what is heuristics? Heuristics are a number of rules or mental shortcuts that allows people to solve problems and make decisions quickly. It can be a trial and error, an educated guess, or a rule of thumb, and many others. Usually, heuristics have two properties. It is fast, so that we can solve problems quickly, and because it is fast, it sometimes results in wrong decisions. So, when wrong decisions happen, especially with garden path sentences, the garden path model of parsing proposes that the initial parse should be reconsidered and appropriate corrections should be made. Now another is the principle of late closure. It states that when a person encounters a new word, the person's parsing mechanism assumes that the word is part of the current phrase. So each new word is added to the current phrase for as long as possible. Let's look at and use the sentence about the musician earlier as an example. So let's read. After the musician played, according to the late closure, the parsing mechanism assumes that the piano is part of the current phrase. So, let's add the piano in the current phrase. After the musician played the piano, but when we reach was, late closure also adds it. So, after the musician played the piano was, it's still okay in that part. And then, wheeled is also added. After the musician played, the piano was wheeled. Okay, now it is obvious that something is wrong. It has made the sentence. Late closure made the sentence into a garden path sentence. So the sentence then needs to be reparsed while taking into account the meaning of the sentence. So it should be, after the musician played, the piano was wheeled of the stage. So that is our correct sentence. Let's go to the second approach or second model, the constraint-based approach to parsing by MacDonald et al. In 1994. This approach refers to the idea that information, in addition to syntax, participates in processing as a person reads or hears a sentence. The said information or factors are made to make predictions about how sentences should be parsed. So there are 4 factors. First is the influence of word meaning. The words and their meaning affects the interpretation of a sentence. Now the example, the defendant examined by the lawyer was unclear. The second one is the evidence examined by the lawyer was unclear. After reading the defendant examined in the sentence, two possibilities present themselves. First is that the defendant could be examining something, or the defendant could be being examined by someone else. It is only after reading the rest of the sentence that it is possible to definitely determine that the defendant is being examined by the lawyer. In contrast, only one possibility presents itself after reading the sentence number 2, as the evidence is unlikely to do the examining since it is just a thing. Now the second factor is the influence of story context. A certain sentence can be better understood if the context or how the sentence is used in a passage or a story is known. The following sentence is proposed by Thomas Beaver in 1970. It is considered to be the most famous garden path sentence because of the confusion it produces. So the sentence is, the horse raced past the barn fell. Some may accuse the sentence to be ungrammatical due to its irregularity, but looking at the sentence in the context of the following story, we will know what it really means. So let's read. There were two jockeys who decided to race their horses. One raced his horse along the path that went past the garden. The other raced his horse along the path that went past the barn. The horse raced past the barn fell. Now, it is clear what the sentence meant to identify which horse fell, and it is the one that raced past the barn. Now, let's go to the influence of scene context, which is the third one. It is observing objects in a scene or the context provided by the scene helps us interpret the sentence. So the visual world paradigm, a concept in the influence of scene context, developed by Michael Tenenhaus and co-workers in 1995, which is a technique that involves determining how information in a scene can influence how a sentence is processed. They have made an experiment which is the one apple scene condition. The participants' eye movements were measured as they saw objects on a table. So as participants look at this display, they were told to carry out the following instructions. Place the apple on the towel in the box. When the participants hear the phrase, place the apple, they move their eyes to the apple. Then hearing on the towel, they looked at the other towel. They did this because they were assuming that they were being told to put the apple on the other towel. But then, when they heard the words in the box, they realized that they were looking at the wrong place and quickly shifted their eyes to the box. The reason participants looked first at the wrong place was that the sentence is ambiguous. First, it seems like on the towel means the place where the apple should be put into, but then it is the location of the apple. But when the ambiguity was removed, participants immediately focused their attention on the box. The important result of this study is that the participants' eye movements occur as they are reading the sentence and are influenced by the contents of the scene. Tenenhaus therefore showed that the participants take into account not only the information provided by the syntactic structure of the sentence, but also what he calls the non-linguistic information, in this case, the information provided by the scene. Opposing the idea proposed by the garden path model that only syntactic rules are taken into account as the sentence is initially unfolding. Now let's go to the fourth factor, the influence of memory load and prior experience with language. It is the load of information our memory takes in and how often the said sentences or similar to it are heard or seen in the past. It also affects our interpretation of a sentence. Now we have an example. The senator who spotted the reporter shouted. Second one, the senator who the reporter spotted shouted. The sentences have the same words, but they are arranged differently to create different constructions. Sentence 2 is more difficult to understand. To understand why it is more difficult, we need to break the sentence into clauses. So the first sentence has two clauses. The main clause, which is the senator shouted, and the embedded clause, which is the senator spotted the reporter. The embedded clause is called embedded because who spotted the reporter is inside the main clause. So, this sentence is an example of subject-relative construction. A subject-relative construction refers to a construction that both the main clause and in the embedded clause has the subject being the subject. So just like in sentence 1, wherein the senator is the subject of both the main clause and the embedded clause. Now let's go to the sentence number 2, which is the senator who the reporter spotted shouted. The main clause is still the senator shouted. The embedded clause, however, is the reporter spotted the senator. In this case, the senator is the subject of the main clause. As before, and is also replaced by who in the other clause, becoming the object in the embedded clause. The senator is the object because he is the one that is spotted, and the reporter is the subject of this clause because the reporter did the spotting. This construction is called the object-relative construction. This construction refers to the subject of a sentence being the object in one of the clauses in a sentence. In the example earlier, the senator, which is replaced by who in the other clause, is the object in the embedded clause. Now, this time, we will know the reasons why the object-relative construction is more difficult to understand than the subject-relative construction. It is because it demands more of the reader's memory, it is more complicated, and there is less exposure to these kinds of sentences, leading to unfamiliarity, as it is not prevalent. It is not really used in daily conversation and common sentences. Now, let's go to our third and last topic. It is the importance of prediction. So as we hear or read sentences, we tend to predict what comes next or its meaning. The most of the times, these predictions are correct. And correct predictions aid us in understanding the sentences, especially in the context wherein language is degraded, especially when there are poor phone connection, or the words that we hear are in a noisy environment, or other times when communication is being interfered by any sources. Just like there are roosters or chickens going outside, or the cars booming around us, that could be the noises that can affect our understanding of a sentence. Therefore, correct predictions aid us in understanding those. Now, we are done talking about understanding sentences. Thank you very much for listening. I hope that we all keep safe in these times and never lose hope. To God be the glory.